Hi guys, Miss Jaclyn here. I miss you all. And although we can't be together for Easter, we can still celebrate together. Parents, I wanted to give you guys a lesson that you can do with your kids at home. So you can either sit back and listen to this story, or you can gather up 12 plastic eggs, find some props around the house with me, and fill each egg up to tell the story of Easter. To start, we'll have 12 eggs, and each of these eggs tells part of the resurrection story. I will show you what is in each egg. I will read a passage of scripture, and I'll read a paragraph that goes along with it explaining it. I encourage you all to participate in the resurrection story this year in preparation for Easter, the true celebration. So to begin, I'm going to read a passage from Matthew chapter 21. Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village in front of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, you shall say, 'The Lord needs them,' and he will send them at once." The disciples went and did as Jesus had directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and put on them their cloaks, and he sat on them. Most of the crowd spread their cloaks on the road, and others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. So to start, we have the blue egg. Now, take a guess. Go ahead. Take a guess and see what you think is going to be in here. If you guessed a donkey, you'd be right. Now, I know a lot of you guys probably don't have a plastic donkey lying around the house, but you can also gather up a leaf or a branch or something to represent the branches that people laid on the ground as Jesus rode through on the donkey. So a donkey like this would work, or use some sort of branch or leaf. Use your imagination for this one. So in Jesus' day, most people walked everywhere. Sometimes kings rode in on donkeys or horses when they entered the city. Then people would stop what they were doing and they would watch as the king rode by. On the day that Jesus rode into their city, the people were thrilled to see him. They believed that he was their new king who had come to save them and fill their lives with joy. The people showed their happiness by spreading tree branches and coats on the road. This was also their way of showing honor to Jesus, just like we use a red carpet today. Next, we're going to read a chapter from Matthew chapter 26, starting at verse 14. Then one of the 12, whose name was Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me if I deliver him over to you?" And they paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment, he sought an opportunity to betray him. So now we have the pink egg. Can anybody guess what's in here? Now this you for sure have at your house. Coins. Get some quarters or dimes and do this with me. Not everyone was happy to have Jesus as their king. Some people only pretended to be happy, but on the inside, they really didn't want anything to do with him. One of those pretenders was a man named Judas Iscariot, one of those 12 disciples, one of Jesus's best friends. Some other men hated Jesus so much that they wanted to kill him, but they needed the help of someone who could get them close to Jesus. Because Judas Iscariot was a pretender and because he was greedy for money, he told these men that he would help them capture Jesus if they would just pay him 30 coins. Get your coins and think about how Jesus was captured just for some money. Next, we read again from Matthew chapter 6, verse 27. And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." Now, I'm sure you guessed it. It's a cup. Now, it may not look like this one, but you can find something in your house. You can find a cup from your kitchen or something that holds water to represent the promise that Jesus made. Jesus had a special dinner with his disciples, 12 of his closest friends who traveled with him and learned from him. During the meal, Jesus stood up and held out a cup and gave everyone a drink. Then he said something that was hard for them to understand. He said that the wine in the cup was his blood, and the bread that they had was his body being broken for them. Now, he didn't actually mean they would be drinking his blood or eating his body, right? It was a symbol. He wanted them to remember this special night and the covenant or promise that he was making to them and to all people. So you can even put a cracker in this egg to represent his promise. Do you know what the promise is? Well, then you better keep listening. Next, we're going to read from Mark chapter 14, starting at verse 32. And they went to a place called Gethsemane. Now, try to say Gethsemane fast. And he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." And he took with him Peter and James and John, and began to be greatly distressed and troubled. And he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch." So, what's in the orange egg? Praying hands. Now, if you want to put something in the egg, you can put a flower in the egg or something to represent the garden that Jesus and his disciples were in. And then I also invite you to fold your hands whichever way you want to represent praying, how Jesus prayed. After dinner with his disciples, Jesus took them to a garden. He asked them to pray while he went to another place in the garden to talk to God alone. He began to be sad and to dread what he knew was going to happen soon. He was going to die. Jesus was willing to die, for he once said, "No one takes my life from me, for I lay it down of my own accord." You see, one of the remarkable things about Jesus, which no one before or since is, he was both God and man at the same time. The God part of him was willing to die because of his great love that he has for you and for me. But the human part of us, which I'm sure we can all understand, did not want to experience the great pain that he would surely suffer by dying on the cross. So when you are afraid or sad, you should do just as Jesus did and pray, because Jesus surely understands. Next, we read a short verse from John chapter 19, verse 1. Then Pilate took Jesus and flogged him. It's as simple as that. Now, flog means to hit. I know it's a big word and we don't use it much anymore. So when we open this green egg, we're going to see a whip. Now, you can use a piece of rope or something at your house to represent this. When Jesus finished praying in the garden, the men who wanted to kill him took him as their prisoner. Then they brought Jesus to Pilate, their ruler, and he had Jesus whipped. The whip used was so long and hard, and it hurt Jesus so much that he bled. Just like when he was talking about the blood represented at the dinner that he would shed for them. Jesus hadn't done anything wrong. The men who wanted to kill him were afraid of losing power. They really wanted Jesus out of the way. They knew that if people believed in him, the Son of God, which he really was, they would follow him. Next, we have my favorite part of the story, found in Mark chapter 14, verse 71 and 72. But Peter, one of his disciples, began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, "I do not know this man of whom you speak." And immediately the rooster crowed a second time. And Peter remembered how Jesus had said to him, "Before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And he broke down and wept. So, we'll open this. And we have a rooster. Now, you may not have a rooster laying around in your house, but you can be creative with this one as well. You may wonder what a rooster had to do with the Easter story, but for Peter, one of Jesus' disciples, the sound of a rooster crowing triggered great sadness and caused him to cry. You see, Peter was one of Jesus's closest friends, and he once promised Jesus that no matter how dangerous things might become, he would always be loyal. Jesus could depend on him. But that began to change when Peter realized that those who planned to kill Jesus might want to kill him too. In fact, Peter was so afraid that he denied even knowing Jesus. Just the evening before, when Peter had promised to be loyal, Jesus told him that he would indeed deny knowing him, not just once or even twice, but 3 times. And in fact, it happened just as Jesus said it would. The rooster was still crowing when Peter remembered what Jesus had said. Before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. Peter was so ashamed that he ran away and cried. This represents how so many of us do what Peter did. We say that we love Jesus so much, but when times get tough, it's easy to deny him, and it's easy to say that we don't believe in him. But even so, Jesus still continued on with the story. So now, we're going to read from Matthew chapter 27, starting in verse 27. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole battalion before him. And they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. And twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and put a reed in his right hand. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." Now, what do you think is inside this light orange egg? It's a crown of thorns. Now, you can gather a twig or the stem of a flower and you can make it into a crown to represent the crown that was on Jesus's head, to represent that they were making fun of Jesus. After Jesus had been whipped, the soldiers took branches with thorns and they twisted them into the shape of a crown and they shoved it down on Jesus's head. And again, Jesus bled. We know that because Jesus was the Son of God, he could have stopped the men from hurting him, but he let them continue. Do you know why? Because even though he hadn't done anything wrong, he had not sinned, Jesus was taking the punishment for all the wrong sins that any person had ever done or ever would do. This includes the sins that you guys committed yesterday with your parents. This includes the sin that I will commit next week that I don't even know about. Next, we read from John chapter 19. So they took Jesus and he went out, bearing his own cross, to the place called the place of a skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side, and Jesus between them. In this egg, there are 3 nails, 2 on the sides and 1 going down the middle. They represent the shape of a cross that Jesus died on, and they represent the 3 that were on the cross, Jesus and 2 other people. Now, you don't have to get anything into the shape of a cross, but you can take a nail that you have at home and put it in one of the eggs. Or if you have a mini cross, you can use that as well. The soldiers took Jesus to the top of a hill outside the city. Then, using nails much larger than these, they nailed him to a rough wooden cross. He died a few hours later. The Bible tells us that Jesus was stronger than any man. The soldiers couldn't have killed Jesus if he had not let them. He could have fought off the soldiers, so why didn't he? Because God loves us so much, he was willing to let Jesus die for our sins and be punished. The things we do or the ways that we don't act or please God. And even though it hurt Jesus badly, he was willing to do what God the Father asked. Jesus, he loves us. Now, we read again from John chapter 19. So the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first man and of the other who had been crucified with Jesus. When they came to Jesus and saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and at once there came out blood and water. Open the egg up and we find a spear. Now you guys can get like a stick or something from outside and you can put it in the egg. Or you can even use a toothpick and break it to represent the spear. Now 2 robbers were crucified with Jesus, one on each side of him. When the soldiers came to check the 3 men on the crosses, Jesus has already died. But just to make sure, they stabbed him again in the side. Now it's sad to think that Jesus died and that he died in such a cruel and unfair way. But remember that Jesus did that because he loves us sinners. He loves all of us. This includes you and me and everyone who tells lies and steals and disobey God in any way, or even someone like the soldier who stabbed him. Now, if this story is making you sad, that's okay. Part of Easter is remembering and being sad that Jesus had to go through that. But the story is not over. It doesn't end here. So keep listening. It gets better, I promise. Matthew 27, verse 57. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who was also a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked him for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. And Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had cut in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the entrance of the tomb and went away. So we open the blue egg, and it's just a piece of cloth. You can use any piece of cloth or an old rag or anything like that, or even a towel, paper towel, because it represents what Jesus was buried in. After Jesus died, a man named Joseph asked if he could bury him, and this was a brave and loving thing for Joseph to do. Remember, the men who killed Jesus did not believe that he was the Son of God. But Joseph, he believed, and he wanted to honor Jesus even after his death. Joseph knew that this might get him in trouble with the soldiers, but he was brave and he asked for permission anyway. Joseph wrapped the body of Jesus in cloth and buried him in a tomb cut out of rock, like a shallow cave. Joseph then went away sad because Jesus was dead, and he wondered what would happen next. Now we read from Matthew 28. We're almost done here. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. And for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. Oh, this is heavy. I don't know how high I can lift this up. Anyone know what's in here? You're right, it's a stone. You can get a little rock or anything from outside. The stone that was rolled in front of Jesus' tomb was much bigger than this stone in this egg. It was probably bigger than a door and probably weighed more than your car. After Jesus was buried, special soldiers were assigned to stand guard at the tomb. But these men were no match for God's angel. It took just one angel to roll that heavy stone away. The guards were so afraid, they just fainted. Now, where did the angel get his strength? Definitely from God. There's no way anyone could do that. Now, we're on the last one. Matthew chapter 28. But the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has risen, as he has said. Come, see the place where he lay." All right, let's see what's in the last egg. Any guesses? Oh, it's pretty light. There's nothing in here. Something is missing. Are you surprised? Well, when 2 women came to the tomb of Jesus, they were also surprised because guess what? The tomb was also empty. Jesus was not there. The angel told them, he has risen. Jesus had come back to life. This was the promise that Jesus made to his disciples at their special dinner. You guys remember when we had the little cup? He promised that he would die, but that he would come back to life to show those who believed in him that they could also live forever too. And we won't live forever here on earth, but we surely can live forever in heaven. Someday, because he died for us, we can meet him and we can thank him in heaven. That's the story of Easter, and it's true. All the eggs represent something. But the best part of the story is the last egg, that it's empty because Jesus had risen from the dead. That surely is worth celebrating. I hope that you celebrate with me this week.